if we go back to having key down here, we could make it such that we could either check whether e.code, equals enter or something, which would mean, check for whether you'll hit the enter key. You could do that. That would work. Alternatively, VueJS has a really nice built-in way of dealing with this, which is it has these things called modifiers. So we can do key down, and then if we do dot enter, that will then fire only on a key down that is of an enter. And there's a bunch of keys you can do this for. So this is quite nice. So now if we do this and I do like hello, you don't see anything until I hit enter and then it appears. And it won't update until you press the enter key. So we can be like, Ben is the best at VueJS. And you hit enter and it updates. And then I might change my mind and be like, nah, Mark's better than Ben.
What sort of what other things could you, instead of enter?
So it's where you go to the API and have a look.
Stop telling me to Google it, Rob. God damn it.
I'm not saying to Google, I'm saying to go to the API. Oh yeah, this is a big one. So there's this thing, there's what you may want to do, for example. So say you have a function that handles an event. Yep.
Yeah.
In fact, you may have, say you nested within, so what you can do in HTML, of course, is I could say I could nest two p tags here. I could have actually, I can make it a bit clearer. Let's have a div, and then inside the div, I have a paragraph. Yep. I could have, actually, let's do it the way that I followed the tutorial that showed me this. It was a better example. Let's do a span inside of here, and let's be like, do not track here. Yep. So say we want to have a region here where we don't want the coordinates to update.
Yeah. So
what we can do is there's by default the event cascades. So the div, because the event when events fire in JavaScript, they initially fire on the span tag because that's the lowest event, and then they cascade up to higher and higher events. So in this case here, the mouse move event originally will fire on the span tag here, but then because it's enclosed in the div, this update coords will still catch it. So what we want to do is we want to basically stop the event from firing on span, and then hopefully then the mouse, this won't update when we hover over this. So in order to do that, there's a v on, there's another one of these dot things, and in this case it's a v on mouse move, and I think it's dot stop. Yeah, so now you can see if you hover over here, it's still updating, you can see, or over here it's updating. But when I move my cursor over the do not track here thing, it freezes. It doesn't track it anymore, and then it goes back again.
Huh? So
that's great.
Rob, there it's telling it, but surely if it's going upwards,
yep.
What's it telling to stop? Because you've told
it to
stop.
The event. So events propagate. So it's basically saying, so the mouse move event originally fires on the span. Yep.
Yeah.
And we're saying mouse move.stop basically means we're going to deal with this event, and we're not going to propagate this event any higher. So we basically, no events higher up in the hierarchy of the HTML page will see the element. We'll see this, yeah. And then of course because we're listening for mouse move inside the div, the div doesn't hear a mouse move because we've blocked it.
Yeah, but for example, if we change mouse move to some other
that won't work.
So if I change
this to click,
yeah, it'll
still work. It'll still work like normal. There's also another one called prevent. So you see here, there's this submit, and then for example, in this example here, they've done .prevent. Prevent is another common one, and what prevent does is some keys. For example, if you have are you familiar with the form element in HTML, guys?
Vaguely. No. Is that why you input it?
Yeah, so forms are like, if you want to do like an email sign, when you have like a login page, yeah, that's a form. So, if you've got like a user, you might have a username input field and a password input field and a submit button. Yeah. One of the things that HTML has built into it is it has some built-in keyboard has some built-in default events. So, for example, when you're on one of those forms, yeah, if you have a submit button, if you hit enter, it will automatically treat that as a submit. But what happens if you don't want to make it so that enter automatically does that? You can use this .prevent, which will stop the default action from occurring. So there are because again HTML was programmed back in the 90s, which was the best period of human history. And that's when all like, you know, and at that time there were a lot of standards set on, you know, what you know, by default you probably do, most people probably do want it that when you're on a login page and you hit enter that it automatically treats that as clicking the button, but some people might not. And so that's what .prevent will basically stop the default action. The other thing it does, for example, as you can see in this comment here, is that when you have a form and you submit it, it will refresh the page. That's just, it does that automatically, but maybe you don't want to refresh the page. Again, .prevent will stop that. And the other thing to note is that the .stop and .prevent have analogous JavaScript functions. So again, if we don't have to call .stop, we could do it. We could do this using an equal sign, and we could pass this to a function like stop everything, and then we could define a function here called stop everything, you know, function E, and then the equivalent kind of pure JavaScript way to do it would be e.stopPropagation, and that's just a built-in JavaScript function. So these dot functions here, they're not magic. They're just making stuff that's built into JavaScript easier to do. So that's something kind of important to know. I spelled propagation wrong, so that's why it's got a line underneath it. It's propagation. The other thing we can do, which this will be probably the last thing I mention because I'll have to run off then, is, so remember before I said between these quotation marks here, you can run any code you like. Yeah, so we can run any valid JavaScript code in here. For example, what we could do inside of this JavaScript code, we could actually do something like x. So x, for example, is this variable here in data. We could do just x equals 25 or something. Yeah, we don't care what value it is. Let's just set it to be something in particular. That makes sense. So we're literally just written a bit of JavaScript code in here. And this is only when we move over the span. And in fact, that's not going to work with this. So I'm actually going to do mouse move.that, and then we don't want to let it go any higher. So let's do .stop. So it will only run this, but then it won't actually, because then otherwise it would get overwritten by update coordinates. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the update coordinates fires after this is fired. So let's try this out. So we're going to go over here, and then when we go over do not track, see it sets it to 25. Yep.
Yeah.
And because we can just write normal JavaScript in here. Now, what happens if we want to access this event object within these brackets? And you may think, why would you want to do that? Because seeing as it gets passed automatically, and you'd be like, okay, why would you? I kind of said half an hour ago, why would you ever need to bother? And the answer is, what happens if you want to pass in other arguments to, for example, say hello? So, for example, what happens if say hello, you have like custom greeting, and you want to pass in the event? How would you handle that situation? Well, in here, in say hello now, we would pass in, you know, whatever value we'd like to use as our custom greeting. Like, for example, Ben is a good person, because you are. And if I close that off, that's fine. But now I'm not passing the event object anymore. So there's one sneaky little trick that you have to do in order to get the event object, and there's a special VueJS object that kind of has it built in, and that's we go another bracket in here, and we do $event. Yep. So this is a special VueJS keyword. So you have this this little event object here. Yep. And this $event is exactly the same as E here, the E we were dealing with before. They're the same thing. Does that kind of make sense? So for example, we could set x. So here we're just saying x equal to 25 inside of our span. If we could basically replace this line of code inside of here and do x equals $event dot client x, and it would be and as you can see, that works, even though we're stopping the propagation. And also notice that there's actually no variation when I move in the y direction. So that's kind of the last thing. Does that make sense at all? Or should I go over that a bit better?
Yeah. So like, you can also, instead of writing it without any brackets, you can just open bracket and write $event. Although there's no reason why you would.
Yeah, you could. But if you could, if you wanted to just mimic update. So what we've written here, update coords. Yeah, we could also write that. That would be indistinguishable. Yeah, you're right. So that they would be the same thing. But Vue.js is smart and kind of assumes that you want to pass in the event jet most of the time. So you could just write update coords. Yeah. Note that I did update coords like this with the brackets open. Yeah.
Work.
Now we're explicitly saying pass nothing.
Yeah.
So now nothing will get passed. And in this case, it would throw an error because we actually need something to be passed.